Emergency meeting called. There has been some huge news that it needs immediate attention. Buvey, talk to me. I think that Manchester City are in a fairly perilous position with this. Over 100 counts of deception.
Yeah.
This could be...
Alleged deception.
Yeah, it's all alleged at the moment, of course. And I think, I would always defer to the rule of law. I think if Manchester City are found innocent of this, then I think anybody that's muddied their name needs to be held accountable. Equally, if they are found guilty, then on something as significant as this, I think that huge ramifications need to be felt.
Of course, yeah. I think you can look at the financial fair play model and obviously clubs that try and veer around it. I think Chelsea probably started a new trend in terms of the spreading the cost so thin across 8-year contracts. But City came in, of course, spent a lot of money. And apparently these kind of breaches of the regulations relate to not disclosing full amounts of money given to players and to managers. And it's gone as far back as Roberto Mancini, who obviously signed a contract with Man City in 2009, given an extraordinary contract at the time, one of the highest paid managers in the history of football at the time. And it's gone all the way back because the Premier League can do that. The Champions League, or the UEFA, when they went for us in the Champions League and tried to kick us out of the Champions League, their case against us could only go so far back. And that's what actually saved us in the Court of Arbitration for Sport, because they couldn't use evidence after a certain period of time. The Premier League can do that in their rule book, and are apparently going back as far as 2009 in terms of accounts that aren't fully detailed.
Is that back to Sinawatra? Is that far back?
No, this is the start of Sheikh Mansour.
So it's only right. Okay.
And it goes into the 2015 season. It goes into 2018. And it's obviously a perilous position. And obviously, as a fan, I think the important thing to talk about, look, everyone's going to be slagging me off in the comments. I get it. Twitter, fine. We've all had the abuse, especially obviously as a Chelsea fan. You can, I'm sure, relate a little bit.
Just as me. Yeah, I get plenty aside from football. Unfortunately
for yourself. But you know what I'm trying to say? We're here to talk about football. I love football. I'm not here. We're not doing a law podcast. Do you know what I mean? So it's hard to differentiate what I love about Man City. And all I'd say, just to start off the podcast, and obviously very interested to see the video. I'm very interested to see what you think about it. But on a footballing level, I think the owners of Man City have spent a lot of money, but I think they've done a lot of good as well. Now, how that's come about is dubious, and if it is potentially illegal, then that is morally wrong, of course. But all I'd say is that City have been successful, and we've seen some incredible things as fans, and it's hard. And I'm sure Chelsea fans can't necessarily differentiate between Abramovich and the success. So, what's your sort of take on it?
I think that if Manchester City are found guilty of this, I think they need to be relegated. I genuinely do, and I'm really glad that this is happening. And I don't even mean that I'm glad that it's happening to City, because I think that when you're a football fan, I think that a lot of people will be able to empathise with this. A lot of people won't and will not enjoy the words I'm about to say at all. But I think a lot of people will certainly understand where I'm coming from here. I think that the amount of money that is sloshing around Premier League football is distasteful. And I think something needs to be done. My own club are certainly accountable for this. I think that we can talk Chelsea. I don't think we have to make this a Man City issue. Manchester City are obviously at the front of everybody's minds because of the charges that have been brought against them. But lots of clubs are behaving in an abhorrent way with regard to money. And I think that the amount of money is awful. I think if you use, a good example for this? Liverpool and Chelsea, if you look at what they did in the most recent window. So PSV, they're building, they're trying to get somewhere. Ruud van Nistelrooy has finally got a team that's looking half decent. Suddenly, bang, Madueke's gone, Gakpo's gone, and Ruud van Nistelrooy, although they're now incredibly flush,
they have to rebuild again.
And ultimately it becomes almost a futile task, because you build again to what end? Yeah, to sell Man City your next youth product, or Manchester United.
Left back. The second choice.
So ultimately, I'm glad that something is being done. You're unfortunate that it's being done to your club.
Yeah.
But I think this needs to be looked at, and on a grander level, I think football is better when it isn't polluted by this ridiculous amount of money. Like, I really do. I think, and this is people are very weird, because when I talk about the finances in football and how I don't like them, people go, "You're a Chelsea fan." I'm like, mate, I don't want this. I don't want Chelsea to do this. There was a time in my youth when I thoroughly enjoyed it. There was a time when I was not far off a teenager when Roman Abramovich came into Chelsea, and I was happily in away end, standing on plastic chairs, dancing to "We're the richest club in the world."
Seeing Crespo come in and
Juan Sebastian Veron suddenly in a Chelsea shirt. Do you know what I mean? And I certainly enjoyed it, but the more holistic side of football is now being eroded massively. And football isn't that. Football is not meant to be like a business. And I think football clubs can be better structured when they're run as a business, but the game itself shouldn't be a business. The game itself, fans talking about spreadsheets and things like that.
It's crazy.
It's not my enjoyment of football. It's not what, I'm always far more interested in how many Stoke fans are drinking in the Euston Flyer when they're playing away at Tottenham than I am your net spend at Man City. I'm never going to get my buzz out of that.
I think the big issue for this, and it's maybe a utopian view, that if cases like this get risen against Man City, maybe it will happen to Newcastle in the next 5 to 10 years. Maybe even Todd Bowley will get issues in the next few years. Where does it creates a divergence somewhere in the narrative? Now, you can either say, does it go back to this kind of noble sport where it's 11 local lads from the city of Manchester area or West London? And obviously it doesn't. Obviously that does not happen. And the way it goes is City will now defend ourselves to the point where we despise the Premier League on a kind of legal level, and we'll make more moves than we already previously did. And City are guilty of being instigators of the Super League. And that unfortunately will go to the point where City will want to protect their interests, which is a lot of money spent by a nation state to potentially make certain political things look cleaner, make money look cleaner. So they're going to look at that and say, how do we protect the incredible thing that has been built, the incredible training ground and the setup at City? How do we protect that? And that will be in a Super League where we can control the rules, never get relegated, and bring in the most incredible players that we want to bring in.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that the Super League is approaching the Super League by stealth. If we don't create a Super League and go into one, I think that we will morph the Premier League into our own version of the Super League. How that will impact on I think that the Super League is going to happen. I think that there are still genuine motivators on the continent that are trying to make this happen.
Yeah,
they're aggravated and they're trying to make that come about and come into fruition. But on this specific thing, I think that Manchester City, the only way that this will end now. I think that Manchester City will either be totally cleared of any wrongdoing, and therefore apologies need to be issued, or Manchester City will start, not next season, the following season, in the Championship.
From my understanding, I don't think the case can be brought that quickly. So, from my understanding, nothing will happen this season.
But they can't appeal it. I thought that the Premier League's motivation here was, don't try and long this out. Don't try it with us. Don't try bringing 100 lawyers, it's a mad firm in the city. Don't try that.
Yeah.
There is no appeal. They've said explicitly, there is no appeal. I could be wrong here because I certainly, my law knowledge comes from
it's crazy.
the odd
we have
film
to talk
I've
about
watched.
This. Yeah, 100%.
But is the motivation for that not simply saying, this is happening now? You are going to face the music and dance here one way or the other.
It's taken them 5 years to get here. That's the only thing I'd say. And I'm not saying I can't, dispute the evidence. I don't 100% know the case. We haven't seen it yet. It's, from my understanding, it is a statement. It's an observation of all the 100+ breaches. And I'm sure there is some legal framework where there will be an opportunity for City to defend ourselves and potentially limit, obviously the club has its interests at heart, to limit as much as the effect on City that it has on City on a footballing level. And it could end up being a fine. It could end up being nothing. It could end up being, as you say, potentially relegation.
That's where I disagree with you, Booth.
Yeah.
I don't think, when you say a fine, what a fine translates to is something very insignificant. In fact, what a points deduction translates to for Man City is something fairly insignificant because the fine, I don't need to explain. Everybody understands why a fine for the richest team in the world or it doesn't matter. So a fine is irrelevant. A points deduction is irrelevant pretty much because you could deduct 40 points from Manchester City and they'll still make it into Europe or something. You know what I mean? So a points deduction has a minor impact, but nothing really significant. The only thing that will actually have an impact, and if you're found guilty, impact is important. Punishment is important, and you are only punished if there is impact. I don't see how it isn't relegation. I can't think of another penalty that actually affects Man City.
I think the worst thing isn't relegation.
Of course it is.
The worst thing is the stripping of the titles, which is another thing that could be issued. I think if City were to wake up and have...
do you want me to go through them? Do you want me to go through the titles that they would lose from this?
Yeah.
The first one, I would not mind at all. FA Cup of 2010-2011 would go to Stoke and Tony Pulis. Wouldn't mind that. The Aguero moment would be gone.
But do you know what, Elliot? They're not gone, are they? Like, let's just actually explore this. The day that you lost a cup final is presumably one of the most harrowing footballing days that you've ever had.
Yeah.
Buvey, the day that you won the cup final against Stoke, very early in the build of Man City, one of the most glorious moments. You had that moment. Elliot felt that pain. So simply auditing
it's not the same.
It's not the same.
You don't want an asterisk next to your name on a Wikipedia. Think about all the Olympians from the Soviet Union that had all this stuff put in them. Steroids in 1950 and all these women were massive blokes and all that. I mean, I'm not being funny. Do you know what I mean? And they got and there's documentary. I mean, look at Lance Armstrong. Okay, Lance Armstrong. Yeah, his family still got the memory of watching him cross the line. This geezer was juiced up beyond belief. He didn't win those Tour de France.
Do you know if you said to me now, do you know the moment of look, Chelsea won the Champions League in Munich, we beat Munich. You know if now you said to me, that didn't actually happen, we're changing the rules and you didn't win that, Bayern Munich won it. I don't care. Like, I'd rather you didn't. But the moment I was in Munich, I watched Drogba score, right in front of me, I watched Fernando Torres win the corner.
Yeah.
That's mine, man. That exists to me. You cannot take that. That is priceless.
I've got one for you though, Rory. The 2013-14 Premier League title will go to Liverpool and Brendan Rodgers.
I've always said he's a top-class manager. I've always known it for that reason. So I knew we'd, but I'm only joking. But it's hard. It's really hard. And the only sort of final narrative I can give, because a lot of this is legal speculation, which neither of us are barely qualified to talk about football, let alone the legality of it.
Agreed.
But I think the only final narrative for me is that it's a massive shame that Roy and I were working together when obviously Roman Abramovich had a London club that Chelsea that Roy supported his whole life, tied up because of a war in Ukraine. That got tied up, and they weren't able to pay working class people that work for the club because of politics. So it's a real shame that these things are happening.
This is why I'm happy that this is happening. And I genuinely don't mean I'm happy it's happening to your club. I'm honestly not. I think that there needs to be a seminal moment in the game.
Yeah.
Something needs to change.
Is this it though?
The amount of money sloshing around in the beautiful game is totally ruining it.
Yeah.
It's ruining football. It's polluting it. It's actually like morphing it into something else, and it's destroying it from the inside out.
Yeah.
The point of football isn't this. And I thought that we won the battle in the Super League. Like, I remember being at Stamford Bridge, and there was like some caricatures of like greedy pigs basically eating the
money
game
and all that. Yeah.
And you're like, that needs to stop. And if this is the moment, and a Man City relegation has to happen off the back of this, so be it.
There we are. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's tough. And give us your predictions as well. What will happen to Man City in the next 6 months, maybe even 12 months, might be even longer. And obviously, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We'll see you soon.
Your sign-outs, I don't know if you'd all agree with this, but just before you go, I think Buvey needs to work on his sign-out, don't you? It feels slightly lost. It feels like slightly don't know what I'm going to say next.
No?
I think it needs to be more concise.
I said subscribe to the channel.
More punchy.
And keep watching.
Yeah, but I just think that the pace...
You do it. I want to see it.
No, I'm not suggesting that I'm very good at this at all. I just think feedback is good.
Yeah, fine.
So I just think that rather than the pause and then thinking delicately about what will come next, I just think it needs to be wallop, bang, slosh, have that.
See you later.